I think first we have to all give tribute to this altar. Not that there has never been, let's see, how do they say it? Last of all altars before, first of all altars to come. But yes, it is glorious, very joyous today. Before I met Swami, when I was only 22, by the grace of God, there was nothing in this world that I could ever imagine actually doing. It was a bit of a existential crisis. It's kind of like a continuous existential crisis. But the one thing that did interest me was theater. I think it's a samskar from the past. I did a little bit of amateur theatricals in high school, and then I continued for a little while until I was cast in the community theater, and I was given the part, the name I don't remember. It's the young woman in the play, which I can't remember the name of, but it was about the Salem witch trials. Crucible, somebody knows it, thank you. And I was the hysterical young girl who accused everyone. And I recall sitting with a friend of mine, and he was going to help me just feed my lines, and I was going to practice. And, we're just having a perfectly reasonable time. He starts feeding my lines, and I suddenly become hysterical because that's the part, So I start behaving in an hysterical manner. And something in me said, this is not good for you, Now, interestingly, just to sort of go this on, when Swami traveled in Europe, he remembered talking to us about someone who came to him for counseling, and that woman was in opera, and she had a deep alto voice. So she always got to play the villainess, the soprano. The heroine is always the soprano, and the hero is always the tenor, and then the villain is the bass and the alto. So she loved her career, she loved to sing, but she said she was always the evil character. And she asked Swami, is this good for me? And he said, well, it's a way of just letting go of those energies, just letting them pass through you, training yourself to realize that it's all just a play of light and shadow, that none of it has to stick to you. It's all part of the reality that we're living in, but where our difficulty comes is that when we personally identify with it, and then when we personally feel that not only is this happening, but it's happening to me, and that my happiness is either enhanced or taken away from me because of these things that are happening. In other words, we don't see it for what it really is. Well, coming back to my high school career, as such as it was, as an actress, one of my real friends in that was a man his name is John Beatty, and he actually has gone on to have a notable career in theater, but not as an actor. He was a set designer, is a beautiful set designer, and he and I were just total pals in this. And he had many unusual interests in his life, which he followed through. And one of them was marionettes, not puppets on your hand, but marionettes with strings. He was immensely talented, and he made this is in high school, he made these fantastic marionettes. And then he would give shows for children. And he would be the voice. And then he got me into this. And so we would go around, I have only vague memories of this, but we'd go here and there and put on these shows, and the marionettes were so fabulous. All these characters were just terrific. And the first time John and I were doing this, I said, John, we're just we had no big stage or anything. We just walked out there and started moving the marionettes like this. I said, who's going to be fooled? And he said, watch. Just watch. And the kids only looked at the marionettes. They never looked at us. We're standing right there pulling the strings, and our feet are there pulling the strings. There was nothing, but they were totally taken in by how fantastic those marionettes looked and how clever John and I were with our dialogue. You know, we acted out whatever we acted out. And it's always stuck with me. Most of my life prior to meeting Swamiji, I feel like I just stood against the wall and waited for the party to start. So I have these vivid impressions. One of them is John and I and those marionettes. Somehow it made a deep, I don't know, it was so magical, I guess. I don't know what other words I can use. But reading this commentary that we have today, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness sees it not. Now, most of the time when we read that, we're thinking about all the evil that happens in this world. We're thinking about really terrible things that are going on even as we speak in many parts of the world. And we think that the darkness is those people who are acting with great evil. And yes, that's true. God is present in those situations and people have shut it out. And that's very terrifying to us. This is a very hard problem, which I hope before I'm finished I'll talk a little bit more about. But the other side of it is the one that Swami talks about, which is, this is a marionette show. And the one pulling the strings is right in front of us. But we don't see it because the marionettes are so well done. And the story is so interesting that we just think it's happening to us. There was a comment by Master. Sorry about this. I tried to make it not happen, but it's still happening. There was a comment by Master that said, we make a grave mistake when we think that everything that happens to us concerns us personally. And I remember reading that 50 years ago, and I thought, what the heck does that mean? Of course, if it happens to me, it concerns me. It's just like the mind just doesn't say it, doesn't see it. But Master himself stated that as an obstacle to our happiness, that we think it's all about us. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not see it. The darkness thinks I am the marionette, or I am in charge. And we don't realize that we are, as Swami says in the Festival of Light, we are a part of all that is. And we're just flowing in this great ocean of experience. And there's so many aspects of it that we just don't see. The presence of God within it. You know, our affirmation for today, you know, I resolve from this point forward to be happiness, to live in happiness. I come from joy, I am joy. In joy, from joy I came, for joy I live. In sacred joy I melt again. But because of the things that happen to us personally, we think that that means that we have been separated from that happiness. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness comprehends it not. You know, the whole spiritual path can come down to such simple points, but the intensity of our commitment to another point of view is so profound that the darkness just simply sits there. And I have to be angry at you. I have to feel like I'm victimized. I have to say, I want to do this and I don't want to do that. We have just think about it, just every minute of every day. How often we're just saying yes and no. Yes to this and no to that. Just all the time. Start when you first wake up in the morning. I mean, I don't know how many of us, years ago when Swami created the Superconscious Living course, and he had in it the Superconscious Living exercises. And he wanted us, he suggested to us that the moment that we are awake in the morning, we leap out of bed and say, I feel positive, energetic, enthusiastic. My first thought was, well, that's going to be hard on a lot of relationships. Because did you know it's a divine law that toast always marries potato? You understand? Toast is the people who go, hooray, it's morning. And potatoes are the ones that go, ugh. And toast always marries potato. So toast gets up and says, I'm positive, energetic, enthusiastic, and potato doesn't. So quite apart from what it does to intimate personal relationships, have any of you ever done that? Even those of us who are of my vintage, I won't ask you to, oh, look, one raised their hand back there. Yeah, but why not? Because yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Some is good, some is bad, this is what I want, this is what I don't. Just watch yourself for the rest of this day and see how much of your energy goes to resisting what is, or just having an opinion about it. When is it really, like, what difference does it make? Swamiji used to joke about this. We'd see something, it comes to my mind from like seeing cars on the freeway or something when we were driving. And when he would see something that he liked, like, well, that's a very nice design on that car. And then he would say, as if he were in charge, I approve. And it sort of became a joke, to I approve of something that has nothing to do with me. Because we're making fun of an attitude that when it comes in a little closer is not so funny, is it? I approve, I don't approve. Now, see, this also has to be balanced by a level of common sense in this. Because to be able to discriminate between that which is uplifted, that which is downward pulling, to be realistic and human enough not to be indifferent to the suffering of other people. So it's not like we become stupid or airheads or anything like that. You can still tell a great deal that's going on in this world is not uplifting, it's not helping. The people who are inflicting suffering, those who are suffering are struggling, those who are inflicting suffering are committing themselves to the karmic rebound of that, which is not going to be joyous for them either. This world is not what we would want it to be. Now there's an interesting point, isn't it? Who put you in charge? I keep waiting to be asked, to reorganize it in a way that I think would be better. And if I ever get a chance, if anybody ever actually gives me the power, I would organize it differently. At least I think I would. But what is the real question? Okay, so people suffer less right now, but then they just get to keep on suffering and suffering and suffering and suffering. There's no point then. There's no end, there's no learning, there's no freedom, there's no liberation. And there's no capacity to ever reach that state of absolute freedom. What do we really want for ourselves? What level of mediocrity are we willing to accept? Swami Kriyananda was raised in a very extremely fine family. He said himself, his parents were married for 60 years. He said he never knew them to have an argument at all, and he scarcely knew them to have a single disagreement. Even among their circle of friends, they were noted for that. They died within 6 months of each other. I knew his parents somewhat when his father first had a heart attack, and he lasted about 2 more years. Swamiji asked me to go live in their house for 6 weeks and help them because they weren't ready to have a stranger in. I wasn't quite family, but I was sort of, sort of an honorary grandchild, And in fact, I I witnessed the way they worked together. It was really sweet to me. At one time, he had had a heart attack and he was debilitated physically. His mind was fine, but his body wasn't as strong, and I was just helping them adjust. And I was doing something in the kitchen with an egg beater, with two beaters like this, and somehow it got jammed like that. And I couldn't get it unjammed, and his mother, Gertrude, was very, I don't want to say she was timid. She wasn't timid, but she wasn't very physically oriented. She immediately wanted me to not touch it. We would call the repairman, just somehow to get involved in the problem. She didn't want me to get involved in the problem. Ray, his father, was sure that if we just applied a little pressure, it would work. But he was incapable of doing it himself. So he knew a little pressure would solve it. She was determined that no one interfere. But, and this was the point. He had said, apply a little pressure. She said, no. And that was the end of it for him. It's like, what did he care? It was just an egg beater, for heaven's sakes. And then I was alone in the kitchen. And I applied a little pressure, and what do you know? And then I was able to present the solved problem. Gertrude was amazed, and Ray said, I thought that would work. But once again, not a shred between them. Ray himself said, let me think how this goes. Because people would ask, what's the secret of your very happy marriage? And Ray said, he said, when we got married, and bear in mind, Swami was born in 1926, so we're back 100 years here. He said, Gertrude, I'm the man of the family, and therefore I'm going to make all the important decisions. And since we decided to get married, there just haven't been any important decisions to make. And actually, Gertrude said to me once, she actually came to a class I gave on relationships. You think I wasn't embarrassed? Oh my God. Afterwards, she said, when Ray and I first got married, he had certain ideas, but he learned. But you see what that's about? Yes and no, I want it this way, it's not that way, this is how I want it. We're just constantly, and that's the darkness we create for ourselves. It's like, is Divine Mother in charge? Am I unconditionally loved by God? Do I have within me the power to face whatever karma comes? And is everything that comes for my ultimate realization of bliss? You have to ask the big questions, because the marionettes are very convincing. And right now, it's very easy. I hear lots of people just going forward about the state of the world, and they're either angry or they're frightened or they're atheistic, whatever it is. It's a challenging show right now. And Master promised us it's not going to get easier, it's going to get worse. He predicted in 1950 that we would face globally very, very difficult circumstances. Being with Swamiji from 1971, and Swami had heard Master say this, not just say, things are going to get hard. Swami said he thundered that there will be terrible cataclysms, he said. I'm not trying to frighten you, but anyone with a brain can see where the world is going right now. It's a battlefield. It's always a battlefield between spiritual ignorance and spiritual wisdom, but there's a lot of shadow people who have been allowed to come onto this planet and just see what they can break. We're transitioning from the age of matter to the age of energy. In the age of matter, forms are fixed, relationships are defined, everybody knows their place and stays in it. when energy becomes the reality, which is what we've been dealing with now, transitioning from 1700 now into 1900, there's a book. It's called The Yugas, which means the ages of the planet, written by friends of mine. It's very, very important. You should read that book. You really should read that book, because otherwise you have no idea what's going on. And it is terrifying, but it's not terrifying in the sense that God is in charge. But when it changes from form to energy, then we start looking underneath the form. Are men and women really that different? Are people with dark skin and light skin really that different? Is my religion really that different from yours? Well, if you look at the form, when we bought this church from the Catholics, whenever that was, 1994, as it happened, some friends from Italy were visiting in our home when we were buying this, and we were talking about buying a Catholic church. And then there was this lots of whispered Italian conversation over here, which we didn't understand. And then the appointed English speaker said, "They don't sell churches. What are you talking about?" Well, yeah, this is the USA. Weird things happen here. What can we say? But they did, and we bought it. And of course, it didn't look like this. There was Jesus being crucified, I believe. At least the cross was there. Maybe Jesus wasn't on it. I can't remember. That looks a little different than this story. But the fact that we came in and put Jesus up there with all those other guys rather freaked out some of the people who'd been coming here before. I had an experience, maybe entirely imaginary, but this was my experience. When the first couple of weeks that I stood here, at that time I wore white. It was before the Nayaswami order. I wore white. I felt and could almost see these men in black who were the priests who'd been in this church for some 50 years before we got it. They were all lined up back there, and they were not pleased. What I mean is the astral form of those beings, but I felt their disapproval. They were standing right outside those closets, which used to be the confessionals, and they just stood there, and it was like, what are you? One, you're facing the audience, you're not facing there. Jesus is gone the crucifix is gone. I'm wearing white, I'm a female here. There were a lot of strikes against me. And I, just carried on with that energy in the back of the room. And about the third or fourth Sunday, I just said, get over it. This is what's happened, and it's not changing. Get over it. And I haven't seen them since. Now, my imagination, true astral communication, I really have no idea. But that's the transition from Kali Yuga form to energy. Well, listen, we love God. We have Jesus up here. We're Jesus' kids too, just like you. But it looked really different. And not everybody can move with that. Not everybody can move with that. And that's what we're in. So what are we going to do about it? Has the light ceased to shine in the darkness? Or is it merely that the darkness is not comprehending it? This is not a small question. And this question is going to get closer and closer and closer and closer to our lives. I wish it weren't true. I'm just telling you what Master said. Just telling you what he said. And Swami, I met him in 1971. Every year from 1971 until he passed in 2013, he would say, I think this is going to be the year. When Master's predictions really begin to happen. And then Swami would say, prophecy, you can see where the energy's going. You can see the karmic inevitability. When all those energies will manifest externally, that's the hard part. So the mere fact of its delay doesn't mean it's not happening. And it would behoove us to practice as much as possible to see that light shining in the darkness. Because when crisis comes, we just respond true to form. Now, there's no reason in the world to be afraid, because nothing is stronger than the light. The light shines and we don't see it, but it doesn't affect the light. You know, I picked the autobiography up, wanted to bring it in because, and I highly recommend this to all of you. It's page 293, right across the picture of Babaji. I have this paragraph, and I keep it in the room where I live, and I keep it where I can see it really often. And we'll read some of it. The Maha Avatar, which is Babaji, the deathless Himalayan master, who has actual spiritual authority for this planet. Babaji is the avatar for avatars. And these are how Yogananda describes it to us. This is fully understood in India. We don't own Babaji in the US. Babaji is a known figure that has responsibility from God. Do not ask me to explain it, but that's just the way it's put. And you can feel it. You know, anyone who says the name of Babaji with devotion draws to himself or herself an instant blessing. And it says, the Maha-Avatar Babaji is in constant communion with Christ, Jesus and Babaji. Together they send out vibrations of redemption and have planned the spiritual technique of salvation for this age. I mean, that's a big ask for us just to accept that. But this is what's been written in this scripture. And then he says, the work of these two fully illumined masters, one with the body, which is Babaji in his eternal form, and one without it, which is Jesus, is to inspire the nations to forsake suicidal wars, race hatred, religious sectarianism, and the boomerang evils of materialism. And this is one of my favorite parts. Babaji is well aware of the trend of modern times. Many years ago, when Swami was doing television shows, recording television shows for national television in India, reaching millions of people, a young man traveling in the woods, no one that any of us knew, had a spiritual encounter with Babaji. And that Babaji gave him a message for Swami Kriyananda. The young man came back and gave Swami the message. Babaji said, I'm very pleased with the work you're doing, especially the television shows. Now, my little tiny pea brain response was, I'm thinking of Babaji up there in his loincloth, sitting in a cave somewhere, and my brain says, how does Babaji know about television? You see what your little brain does when the light shines in darkness? Of course, Babaji knows about television. What kind of a tiny little mind would not know that? But Babaji is well aware of the trend of modern times. You know, the world that we think the marionettes are so persuasive to us, we don't realize that the light is shining behind it. The great power of these masters is pulling all the strings. But the plot is not the one we want. That's why we don't see it. When the story goes the way we want it, we know God is on our side. When the story does not go the way we want it. And if we have chosen to incarnate at a time when the story may not go the way we want it, are we going to just live in the darkness? Are we going to see the light behind it? We have to practice when it's easier, my friends. We have to practice all the time. When one of my friends, Paula, got cancer, she had the third time it came back is when it took her life. Between the second and the third, or the first and second, she was the sweetest woman I knew. She said, Asha, you know, I just don't have the luxury of having a single negative thought. That's what she said. I said, Paul, you're the sweetest girl I know, but if you think there's room for improvement, go ahead. But I can always hear her voice, and she talked a little like that. She had a very childlike way. I don't have the luxury of having a single negative thought. Do we have the luxury to be afraid, to forget God's presence? Jesus and Babaji are working together for the salvation of this age. Anyone who says the name of Babaji with devotion attracts an instant blessing. Do we want to be the ignorance that doesn't perceive the light? And how is that working for you? You know? Is that a good life plan? And if times get really tough, you know, all it's going to do is just going to wake us up. You know, I'm going to shut the book. You can read it later. It's just going to wake us up. It's going to make us jump out of our sleep and say, I'm positive, energetic, enthusiastic. Is that so bad? Why don't we just get ahead of it? Instead of waiting until we catch fire from behind and then have to run to the light, why don't we just get in motion? Good question, huh? God bless you.
We'll have a moment of meditation. Om, peace. Amen.